So here I am set up for the Guadalcanal scenario. I moved the Commonwealth supply units out to sea. I haven't done that yet with the U.S. The Japanese, I'm not going to do it because I think they get automatic first move. They're taking a naval action. I don't really need it. You know, I can set them up as needed as I try to decide what my tactic is, or for this scenario. But here's where the problem starts to come. I'm considering putting some of the Commonwealth fleet out. It's very obvious the Japanese are making a move westward, right? Either into India, which is what was suggested, or maybe Australia. You know, Australia looks really easy, right? It's a big open area. I can invade anywhere, and if I can get a foothold, I can start pumping troops in, and I should be able to take it. Except I don't have a lot of army for this game because the army's in China. Of course, I don't really have enough army to take India on either. I don't have enough to hold Burma, from what I can tell. So I'm not quite sure how you're supposed to gain a whole hell of a lot down here, but I think I could take Ceylon. You know, is Ceylon that much more valuable than, like, I don't know, well, certainly what, Melbourne or Sydney, I think. I don't know, because I need to have that long list of objective hexes. They're not marked on the map in any way. I think when I actually play it, I could either use little discs for them, but with a game this size, little discs are going to piss me off. I may just put little markings on the map for the objectives. That's what should be here, right? There should be something to distinguish the stuff you really want for the campaign, and since most scenarios use it, for the scenarios, and all the stuff that's, you know, required to play the game. But I think it actually highlights the fact that the stuff you want to win the campaign, it doesn't really matter to the designers, nor should it to me. So I should just ignore it. But then, what's going to drive me? Well, conquest. Yeah. If this were a land game, no problem. As a naval game, shit, I don't know. What the hell's that crap worth? You know, I need something to guide me. Okay. But that's just me. The fact that there are no free French set up, and the scenario describes them, not just in the thing where it says the Free French are controlled, but in the player notes it says the Commonwealth U.S. Free French player, as though there should be some French troops on the board. Now, I looked, I don't see them on the charts. But this method of giving setup, it's so hideous. It takes so much effort to decipher, etc. I'm not sure what to suggest because it's very, very compact. But it's not surprising there were technical errors there. Obviously, people don't really play the scenarios very much, so they probably don't give a shit. And they don't test them as much. Those are just system test pieces early on, and then they go to, you know, the grand campaign and make sure that plays a little better. Because that's what everybody's interested in. Okay, anyway. So what's hard here is for the Commonwealth, I don't know what to defend. I'm afraid to put my fleet out here in India because the Japanese just may not go for it, if that's the case. On the other hand, I can't leave my fleet in port or the Japanese will just sail in and bomb the hell out of it. I don't know what to do. I can't defend things like Australia with my fleet. There's a possibility of leaving, I guess, a small force out there to intercept, force the Japanese to fight their way through or not. But here's the problem with that. If the Japanese choose not to, if they choose to fight their way through that small force, they're going to be a bigger odds shift compared to, they're going to have better odds than if I put the entire Commonwealth fleet in one place. And the Japanese clearly have enough to cope with the entire Commonwealth fleet as well. So, if I wanted to defend Australia from a naval invasion, if I wanted to defend outlying stuff, I couldn't do it. Which is probably why the Japanese took the particular strategy that they did historically, which is let's just scoop up lots of little stuff that's worth victory points. Now, the problem I have, of course, though, is things like New Caledonia probably have a little French unit in it, and so it's not going to just be an invasion of something. Also, I don't know what's worth anything without looking at that list. I do know the victory points for the scenario. We can look at that. By the way, that unit I found, it couldn't have been in the right place. It was supposed to be in Somaliland, and there's just no way. Not just because of the distance, but because I know what I set up in Somaliland. It was just the territorial. So that unit was just kicking around waiting to get placed, I guess. Okay, so the victory conditions are 5 for each friendly controlled objective hex that was enemy controlled at the start of the game. This could easily be the way of winning it, you know, if there's open objective hexes, which I'm sure there are. The Japanese have tons of them, I'm sure, because I just don't have the troops or the capacity. I view them as being on the attack to defend them. 4 for each enemy carrier destroyed. Well, the Brits would be a good source of those. 3 for each USCW France player. Make sure that the Japanese don't have a unit in the sea box in China or South China Sea. 6 if in neither. Well, I guess I got to get some kind of some kind of ship in there, just as, you know, that's part of my victory conditions. Okay, I'm not worried about that too much because, again, I'm not going to score this, but I should try to do that. 2 for each friendly controlled oil resource point that was enemy controlled at the start of the game. Okay. The Japanese have lots of oil here. If we can get into the Dutch East Indies, the Japanese are in trouble. I don't have the forces available to defend that territory. And 1 for each other friendly controlled resource point that was enemy controlled at the start of the game. And then you get a total there with historical objectives here. And the way this kind of works is odd. I don't know if you're supposed to proportion it to the historical victory conditions, which would be what the core width game kind of does. I think this is just the number of objectives that each player has. It's weird because instead of an equal sign, they've got this little but some of those might be estimates, you know. Was the South China Sea covered or whatever, but I'm not sure if that's objective for the victory points or if that's objective spaces. If it's objective spaces, that little approximate sign isn't correct, but it seems to be used as an equals throughout the rolls in various places. That may be an Australian thing. I don't know. I have no idea what that's for. Anyway, I guess we'll give a shot. I still haven't figured this out, and I'll have to think about it some more. But I don't think I can defend anything. I think I have to put my fleet out at sea to begin with because I do not want a port attack on my fleet. I just don't think, you know, I don't think that's going to work. I think my fleet will get destroyed by a port attack, even if it's not a surprise attack. Well, I had something of a disaster with my camera setup today. The spare camera that I use is a charger. I'm probably making a mistake. I pulled the plug out each time I use it and then made it as disconnected as this one's plug is. So now I got the new one charging there. Now this one uses a different battery, different size battery, so I'm not going to be able to use it as just a charger. I've got a charger on order for this camera, but midway through this video I'll have to switch cameras. Anyway, enough of that, right? I've set up and launched my English fleets into there, and I also want to send this naval air out there. I think those are carrier planes. I just want that naval air out there to strengthen things. These all, wow, what's that 2 mean? I hope that's not its, oh, this is a carrier plane. That's not going to help. It's too far for it to get. It could get into the 1 box and maybe be helpful, but I can intercept with it. Well, then it'll be in the 0 box and almost certainly not be helpful. Anyway, it's an old plane. It's not that old. Looks pretty potent, actually. It's too big for me to launch. Yeah, but if I launch it into the 1 box, it'll be in the 0 box anyway, so that'll be where it's at for an interception. So I've got some of the fleet there. I kept some of the fleet available for possibly a secondary strike. I don't know how this is going to all work. There's a bunch of Japanese ships here, far more than the entire British fleet, so I'm probably being stupid doing that. But I don't know. I think the Japanese could swing around. No, this is a different sea zone. So they've got to be in this sea zone to do the port attack in Ceylon's main city. The American fleet, well, Honolulu is actually in multiple sea zones. I'm not too worried about this one being reached. The Japanese could swing around here. That's pretty risky, though. So I'm kind of hoping that they come up against my main fleet there. Now, this isn't my biggest U.S. fleet. My biggest U.S. fleet is out here, but I can't, allow another port attack. So I'm kind of challenging them to engage. They have a smaller fleet here. Now, the Japanese plan is to try to win the naval battle first before they move into the land battle. They're going to automatically have they have the initiative bonus, but they also automatically have the initiative for the first turn. So let's take a look at the sequence of play, and let's knock the map out of the way. One of the guys over at the Game Box noted that the colors on the two Asian maps are different. The counters are all different colors, but even the colors on two maps that came in the same set are not the same. They have real consistency issues. Now, more modern copies of the game look better, and maybe my expansion kit looked better, but I sold that. All right, this is not what I need. Getting to the point where I don't have enough table. This was enough for a one mapper easily, but so we get to check the weather. And that means these charts. And the weather's over here. Let's grab something red for the Japanese. And it looks like we're in May, June. I have no idea what the weather's going to be like here. We'll have to probably write some new chits. Should be good, but a 1 may not be. That looks pretty damn terrible. That's going to get me a 2-point modifier. There's 2. On the next weather turn. And that's going to be, we've got 2 turns out, so the Allied turn will be here, the Japanese next turn will be out here, and that's when we'll check that weather again. Now, that +2 is going to drive us closer to fair weather here. This is an anomaly to have this bad of weather. But what do we have here? We have northern monsoon, southern monsoon, and I think southern temperate. The 2 monsoons are going to be in storm. Yeah, as is the southern temperate. Do we have anything else? We have the Arctic zone up here. We have some north temperate up here. How are they? North temperate storm. Arctic snow. Wow, this is bad weather. So I'm going to have to make a whole bunch of little sheets for that. And maybe this first impulse we're not going to see the Japanese come out because it sucks. Bad weather may not be such a terrible thing. The Japanese have a pretty good surface fleet, right? They got a good air fleet too. They just outnumber everybody in this at the start of this scenario. There's a good sized US fleet back here, but that can't get out of the way. Most of the Allied forces, well, not most, but there's significant forces on that track, I guess. I don't know. So let's look. Storm is going to give us well, supply range doesn't change because we're here in the Asia. No invasions, land units, terrain costs are more, land attacks penalized. You can't fly air missions, naval air combat's not allowed, no shore bombardment. And +1 to the search rolls with air assets not really mattering. Well, that actually weakens, I think, some of the Allied capabilities who have naval air units in place. I wasn't smart enough to put one over here. but I think the cover of the lousy weather is actually going to help me. It's kind of drooled on the map. It's hard to talk with a pipe in your mouth and leaning down. So I think I'm going to make those moves. Now let's take a look at what the Japanese are going to do. They're coming out of a port here. I think it's a dual port. Oh no, it's all in this area. So 1 gets me out to here. 2 gets me here. Now I don't know what my movement rate is, but it would cost 3, 4, 5, out to 6. I don't think I can go out to 6 with a significant portion of my fleet. I could split my fleet up, hoping, to get those extra units in. That's dangerous because whatever those extra units are might become a smaller force. On the other hand, if I have most of my fleet able to get to a good search place, I may just bring part of my fleet out, or I may split my fleet, or I can gather it all at the lower search number and take my chances on that. It's just a number of different options, all of which have their costs. So that's where I'll be moving with these, and these guys will be coming out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, again maybe out to 6, which would get us something of a drop. So we'll do that. So when I looked at my setup, I wasn't really thrilled. I have a huge quantity of aircraft carriers here. This is my main strike force. It was meant to take the Commonwealth out using air power. Now, if I was playing this with the task force sheet, here it is here. As you can see, the Japanese have, 4 task force here. The US have 7. But they're kind of shared between different forces, and that's really, really annoying to me. But I think a lot less space could be taken up using little cards as the task forces or something. And I may end up coming up with some kind of solution. But if I was playing with the task force, I wouldn't know what the forces are once they take off at sea. But I have intelligence that lets me know what they are when they're at port, no matter what. So there's not a whole hell of a lot. There can be a guessing game once the ships get to sea. And that's actually fairly accurate. When fleets were in port, it was pretty well known what was there through a combination of methods, including aerial reconnaissance, etc. If they were close enough to be impacted, there were planes that could get over those areas and take some photographs. But once you hit the open sea, it's really hard to tell where they actually went, especially if they slip out under cover of night or fog or something like that. Anyway, I looked there and said, I've got a huge air power force here and not a lot of battleships. There's some, I think these are battleships or else heavy cruisers or something. They're not bad, but I don't think they can hold, I don't think they give me the huge advantage that all my air power from my carrier strike force would give over here. Over here I've got a big carrier force too. I've got a nice battleship row. I don't know if I have the Yamato here. I don't remember which stack that's in. There it is. There it is. Some nice big numbers. But then I look and the US has a pile of battleships, and they have 1 aircraft carrier and 1 plane. So that doesn't strike me as particularly worthwhile either. One notable thing is port attacks happen before you get to slide into place. So you got to be in position before you launch a port attack. And it looks to me like the rest of the stuff I probably don't really want to do either. So I sent, some ships out to cover, I think I need points in here and here, China Sea, South China Sea. I think those were the 2. Hope it's not Sea of Japan. I would have had a harder time getting there with an actual ship. Whether or not I want to try to slip my subs in and attack convoys or whatever, it seems pretty minor at this point, although it is something I want to consider when it is something that's going to be part of my strategy when I'm playing the big game. But I think I'm going to save my subs and move them out during the regular combat. No. Or I could withhold them from combat and then there's no battle, right? But I see no real point to tipping my hand right now. So I think there's basically nothing for the Japanese to do, and this pushes forward 2 spaces and puts us over to an Allied impulse. Okay, so for the Allied turn, and I kind of agonized, as I always do with naval type stuff, I decided to throw my remainder of the Commonwealth into play here. The little force that I had left to try to handle things, it's just not enough to do anything, so protecting this sea zone seemed to be a reasonable solution. For the U.S., things are a little harder. I did a number of aircraft rebases. That's actually at the end of the impulse. Getting a bunch of my planes into play. Pulled the stuff off the west coast here. The east coast stuff sailed around through the Panama Canal as well. That just uses sea areas. But then I have to do, for the aircraft rebases, I have to count 2 points per dot. I think this map is 2 points per dot. Damned if I can remember. But anyway, we're placed here, making our way, because this is the East Polynesian Sea, that gets us to here or here. So I had to make my way up and into, somewhat closer to striking range. I'm allowed to do rebase missions during the storm. It's the one thing I am allowed to do. And I'm allowed to triple the range on a rebase according to this option here, as long as I don't fly over any enemy territory. So I made it into play here, and we're getting closer. Meanwhile, the carriers are coming up, and there's a couple more carrier planes over here that I can pick up at the end of the turn. I'm going to have to settle into, whatever this is, Papit. Down here. Samoa doesn't look terribly useful. It's a huge port and very powerful for that, but I want to get my fleet and my forces together. And that's kind of the problem that I run into here, is what's the value of capturing things versus trying to, consolidate my force for a single strike force. And since there's no real stacking limits and there's a lot of power, maybe there's a stacking limit in the sense of the number of points I can get together, but the surface value is 241. The air to sea is 61. I don't think I'm anywhere near those numbers. I think those are pretty much, what you could possibly maybe gather together. I've got enough of a problem having my force split into two groups that, splitting the U.S. into two different groups seems like a bad idea in the context of what I'm playing with here. Now, in the context of the Grand Campaign, it might make sense. I might have enough force to challenge the Japanese from three different directions and be able to say, okay, look, if they want to combine and go after me in one place, that's fine, but I'm going to be able to do some island hopping and grab things. But I don't really have a grasp on that yet as to, what my victory goals are in the Grand Campaign. And the goals in this scenario, I'm just putting aside. Yes, probably island hopping will get me more points, but I'm not really that interested in trying to figure out what all the objective hexes are and where they are. That's just too much damn trouble. Unfortunately, the list of those hexes doesn't include any kind of hex number or any way of finding them where it's listed in the rules, and not under this scenario, but in the main game rules. And if I was playing the main game, I wouldn't give a shit about them. I don't think this game is really designed to care about, hey, how much did I actually score? I think it's designed more for, well, how did the war turn out? Does it look good? Does it not? I'm not going to worry about a final end date. This sucker goes out to 1950, right? Well, a game like Third Reich is a lot easier to grasp what I'm supposed to do. I feel like the main thing I'm supposed to do here is defeat the Axis as the Allies. And as the Axis, hold on as long as you can. And if you can actually turn it around and start winning, that's great, But probably get to a point where you call it. Anyway, that will push the Allied marker out to an Axis marker here. We'll put a little Japanese thing. I got to remember the weather's got a +2, so we're going to see good weather. And I think we're going to see the big showdown happening. There's more ships down here now, though. I was able to get another carrier and a couple of, supporting units, some battleships, some cruisers into play there. So the U.S. is not as weak as it should be at the beginning of things. Do I even want to engage them? Well, I've got a hell of an aircraft strike force here, so maybe. They managed to get like I said, a couple of carriers into play, and that's a lot more than they had. But I think I want to take them on. If you're playing with Hidden Task Force, it's a lot harder to judge what you're facing. Because remember, any given naval combat you might be able to pull out of and not be facing anything significant when you think you are. You may just see activity going on, naval activity, and it might end up just being a couple of cruisers. And I think the game is more interesting when you're playing that kind of cat and mouse game, so that you don't see, okay, look, that's the U.S. fleet. I want to face it, I can. If I want to spread out and grab all kind of stuff, I can. I know I'm safe either way. I know what I'm facing in those conditions. And that doesn't really correspond to the naval war in the Pacific, which was really a game of cat and mouse. So I feel like the hidden task forces are almost a necessity to kind of capture that. I'm capable of playing with bluffing. Someone was mentioning with what? Over on BGG, I still keep an eye out on it. With what the hell is the game? Should be down near DAC somewhere if I can find that over there. But I can't find the game I'm looking for. The Blocks in Africa game. Oh, there it is. Rommel in the Desert. That's a game of bluffing. Well, okay, look, I can simulate bluffing by doing randomizing, right? Hey, here are some good ideas, and I play that in. It's not the same as bluffing, but you get the same effect in that by kind of giving proportions to the different choices. It's not the same kind of mood and not the same kind of enjoyment of play, though. So I don't know if I really want to do that, but certainly for this scenario where I'm just trying to capture the idea of how the naval system works, I think I'm going to forego it, even though, if you played this with any kind of serious competition in mind, you would have all the victory hexes charted out, and people would have, goals that they came up with in their mind, and they would try to affect them, etc. And yeah, I'm just babbling for no purpose here. There is much, much better in this next impulse, but we have rain in the northern monsoon zone. That's southern monsoon down here. Okay. Unfortunately, both the big fleets I want to engage are northern monsoon. And what does rain do? Well, the biggie for rain is going to be the aircraft air-to-sea tactical and strategic factors are halved. There's a reduction of shore bombardment in spaces that have this little asterisk on them, which is most of the close ones. And that's not really an issue. And a +1 to the search roll, which again can lead to a lack of combat, but it's not likely. It doesn't guarantee an advantage to one side or the other. The air power reduction is painful, but I think I want to take it. If I recall correctly, rain doesn't affect the carrier bonus for searching. So I think I'm going to at least go after the Commonwealth. Whether or not I want to go after the U.S. is harder. I have heavier surface ships here, but I'm also still very reliant on my carrier force. If I look through, you can see there's a fair-sized carrier force for the Americans too. So I don't know whether I want to launch an attack in both places. I feel like I probably have to. If I want to get moving on this scenario and possibly gain some territory, I need to knock those fleets out. Now, that's a bit much to ask for, but you'll see whoever wins the big cataclysmic, naval combat pretty much is going to win this scenario. That seems pretty clear to me if you have it set up in such a way where it comes down to such. The real problem is, if you're playing this with hidden fleets, there's no guarantee of that, massive showdown in the Pacific happening. And it didn't happen historically, really. Things like Midway, that wasn't the whole fleet out there. The Japanese split up their forces, the Americans split up their forces to do multiple advances. Personally, I think that's a bad idea. I don't think the games capture things correctly, and I'm not quite sure, why any player of the game would follow a historical strategy. I think they would coordinate their forces. They may send out some light forces to accomplish other tasks and run away if they get screwed, but they want to have their best gun forward, I think. If you can hit half the American fleet with your full fleet, you have an advantage. The only real question is whether, I want to commit this fleet, which isn't terribly strong, or if I want to keep it in port. Let's keep it in port. The rain, everything else, I don't think I outnumber the U.S. that much. I think I have parity. If they try to do anything, I can engage them. And let's go after the Commonwealth fleet and drive it out. And this is just going to be movement coming out of here. One move to here, two to here, and then we move out 3, 4, and I've got to decide how much of my fleet I want to take. If I don't want to take it all, I can leave them in this box, but I'm at a disadvantage. So, I see this, which is just a little cruiser, but it only has a speed of 4 on it. Range doesn't matter as long as I'm within that many sea zones. I only have a speed of 4 on it, so maybe it's better for me to pump most of my fleet into the 5 box. The Brits had less problem because they were coming right out of port. Of course, I could also wait, a turn and force the Brits back another box, but I think I want to concentrate against them. Following the sequence of play, naval combat is fairly early in the turn. Positioned here, the Brits had an opportunity to throw a couple of units in as interceptions, as did the Japanese for that matter, although they could have actually done a naval air movement to get it in there, but whatever. But that's a ground bomber. It's not terribly effective. It only had a 1 anti. Only had 1 point for naval air, so I'm gonna hold off on that. So here's where we went. We had to go into the 2 box because we needed speed 4 ships. A significant amount of our carriers are speed 4, and then also most of our heavy ships were speed 4. So we don't want to be in a stupid position there. So we've done that. If there are any subs involved, they're engaged. I don't think there are any, though. That's a choice. Now both sides get to do a search. For a search, we're going to roll a die and compare it to the box that we're in. There wasn't an interception here because the Japanese weren't trying to fight their way through. So we automatically go to the naval combat rather than the interception result for combat. So we're both going to roll here. Now the rain does a +1 to the search rolls. And you can see it's not very likely to find each other, actually. Which may mean that there's a port attack or something, although I think that may flip you. There aren't 10 convoy points. I need 1 convoy point in each area. I don't have that kind of countermix here. You don't need that. You need more than that when you're transporting actual resources through the convoys. But so we don't worry about that. We've got +1 for rain. But the number is modified because both sides have carriers with carrier planes on it. Now, here's where it gets kind of tough. I got to look through the carrier planes and see what kind of range we have on these. Do we have 4 to 6, 7 or more if I'm playing with this option? Let's ignore that option for this one because I'm doing it on camera and I don't want to paw through all the pieces. I'm going to have to stop other times. But I'll just give each one a +1. And that cancels out the rain. It's a +1 to the number of the box versus +1 to the die roll for the rain. Okay. And we'll just roll. Okay, so the Brits rolled an 8. That's not good at all. They're effectively in the 4 box because of that. The Japanese rolled a 3, which actually matches the box they're in. So they succeeded. Now, they could go pick on just this convoy if they want, but that's not why they're here. They're here to fight the battle. So let's see what we get we're going to deal with surprise points here. So the Japanese would get to pick which box they wanted to attack of British forces. If the Japanese had thrown some of their air power into here, they wouldn't be able to bring the planes that they threw into these spaces in. They would only be able to bring things from the from the 2 or higher box because of canceling modifiers and the die roll. So surprise points, okay. The highest section of the C box that contains units, so that's a 2 section. I have +2 surprise points for the Japanese. And the opponent's roll, which is a 7. That gives me 9 points. I'm going to be able to guarantee an air combat without having to pick the type, and I would prefer that. So here are other options I have. Well, I could spend to avoid combat. Obviously, I don't want to do that. But I can pick specific targets. I can also increase my column on the naval chart and stuff like that. So I've got to consider what I'm doing. Right now I have that 9 points available to me to expend. Playing around with columns is probably pretty good, but on the other hand, picking targets allows me to destroy key units like the aircraft carriers. So it's not like you just guarantee that you want to take the columns. What I'm going to have to do now is break up all the pieces from the stack and count up the air to sea factors that are coming in. Now, we got a problem though because we have anti-air first. Oh, well, first, before we do any of this, is we do an air-to-air combat, which we did over in the land game. So we're not going to actually be counting factors. We're going to be pulling the planes off to see which ones get through to do their bombing runs. And I have to set that up, and I'll come back partway through it, I think. And the Brits were unfortunately woefully inadequate for this big carrier battle going on. Here's all the different planes that are involved in the battle. The Japanese choose to just put one fighter plane because they have such a good fighter plane that they just outclass whatever the Brits are doing. And the Brits are going to put a single plane. This is a fighter bomber that they're going to use as a fighter for this round of naval combat. It'll be a fighter for the whole round if there's more rounds of air combat. And then this one is going to be, well, maybe I'll get through and be able to damage a Japanese ship. But I'm just basically, it's a turkey shoot right now. The Brits don't have enough air cover to protect themselves. Should have brought these guys in, but they wouldn't have been involved in the battle anyway. They wouldn't have been. I couldn't have brought them in as interceptors with any chance of getting them into the battle, really. That's the problem. If I had put them out there originally, well, this guy could have gotten out to the 3 box, actually, and he should have done so. He has a 4 movement allowance. That would have given me some fighter cover, but then I have no fighter to cope with the Burma situation. So all I have is carrier planes down there. So now, let's see. And I couldn't fly the mission. I would have had to fly the mission before setup. I haven't gotten a chance to fly the mission otherwise except as an interception where they'd have half the range. So, let's see. The inactive side gets to go first on their die roll, but again, remember, effects are at the same time. I've got a 2 fighter plane coming in against a 6. That's at -4. There's no backup planes. Remember, you get a modifier for planes that are behind you. There's actually modifiers to just planes behind you. They have to be good planes. They have to be equal quality. So -4, and I roll a 9, which is going to be the attacker clears 1. The attacker clears through a defending bomber. Well, I'm going to clear through a shitty bomber. I'll clear through this one, which has a little bit of counter-air power. Hey, if you know, whatever. So that's going to definitely attack. And now the Japanese get to fire back, and they're on the +4 table. And they only roll a 4, which is an AX, which is the attacker destroys the defender's front fighter or bomber. I get to choose which one. I'm going to kill a fighter. Unfortunately, my counter trays are all stacked, so I can't put it away very easily. But that's just dead, and the pilot's, I think, dead with it. We'll have to see, because sometimes they get rescued from sea. So it's good that I keep it there. And now we go to a second round of air combat. Now, the Brits could call off their air combat here, but I've got a chance of getting this bomber through, and I think my carriers are going to be toast. So I'm going to stick around. And now, for the second round, the fighter goes after the bomber. The bombers aren't going to directly engage each other. They're busy trying to bomb. So the fighter goes after the bomber. I'm at +5 there. And that's a 16, which is going to be a DX. I got a green result. Okay, the pilot survives. So actually, this plane dies, but the pilot is recovered. So from the earlier one. 16 on, what was it, +5? That's going to be a Defender DX. DX is going to be Defender destroys his own front fighter or bomber. That's going to kill this one as well. This time the pilot dies, because I got kind of one of these orangish results, which says the pilot survives only if shot down over friendly territory. Okay. So, now we're to the anti-aircraft fire. And for that, we're going to have to total the target unit anti-aircraft factors. And those are, I think, the upper right on a ship. No, the lower left. I'm going to have to add up all the values on all the British ships that are engaged. And I'll come up with some total, and we'll make a die roll. I'll be back in a bit. It turns out there are 26 anti-air factors coming in. I've moved this 9 to remind me of the surprise factors. I'm going to flip back and see, hey, what is it going to cost me? Because I could reduce the shifts on this, I believe. Yeah, I can decrease the opponent's column on any combat table by 2. 26 is going to put me here. I don't know how many planes I have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are cleared. So that'll be here. And anti-air will give me a 1/2. Now if you recall, anti-air works a little different from other things, which is going to be based on die rolls. Yeah, a lot of special cases you got to look up and, you know, because nothing ever works the same. So I'll be getting, what, 2 dice, and I get to count one of them. And every 10 points causes some significant damage. 5 points causes some damage. I think I can take that. I'm going to just let him roll. Well, 2 dice, he gets to pick one. What happens if I reduce the column? Okay, that's a... Wow. Yeah, see, that can't be that can't be 5 dice I get to pick 2 when this is 2 dice I get to pick 1, can it? So what's up with that -2? Damned if I know. Oh, that's 5 dice. I get to pick the 2. The opponent, the Japanese, would get to pick the 2 dice. Yeah, I think I'm fine, though. I mean, that's probably a little better, but I think I'm fine giving 2 dice 1. It just doesn't seem like... I think I'm going to get better advantage out of using my surprise points to do hits. Okay. So that's 7 points. That's a full 5. That's going to destroy a carrier plane. Now, who chooses which one? It's going to be the Japanese who choose which plane gets destroyed. Their own plane choice of destruction. And this is clearly the worst plane out there. What happens to pilots in this? I don't know. I have to see if there are any rules for that. My imagination is that it's not very likely that a pilot doing a bombing run, I can't find anything, is going to survive. Some may, some may not, but I'm going to count this as a loss, in part because it's orange here, and that matches the orange over here, right? I don't know. But I can't find a rule that covers the pilots here. Okay. Now, what I've got to do is I've got to count up my bomber factors going in, and that's going to be the naval air value up here, so that's 2, 4, 8, 12, 17 points. I'm facing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13, 14, 15, 16 ships. 17 points against 16 ships. So it's air to sea. 17 puts me on a nice column over here. 16 ships puts me not quite on a column. And that would be 3x, 1 damaged, 1 aborted. But I have those 9 surprise points. I think I'd like to pick a couple of hits. Choosing your target costs 3 each. That's going to cost me 6 of my points. See, I got kind of a bone number here, right? You know, 9. What can I do for that? I could spend 6 of it to increase columns. That would increase me 3 columns. And then I'd be up here against, what, 16 ships again. That would give me a 4-2-2 instead of a 3-1-1. I destroy an extra ship. But on the other hand, here I can pick specific ships. Now, on the other side of things, I've wiped out some of their heavier carrier air power. They do have a couple of carrier airplanes over there. I don't know if they can put them on their ships, though. That may be why they're out here. So these guys, this guy can go on anything. So he's not a problem. This guy, however, he's not going on anything that's not dark blue, and neither of these have a dark blue box. So this plane is not going to be carrier-based. So I'm kind of less interested in wiping out his carriers, I think. So I think I'm going to take 3 column shifts, and I'm going to take 1 target, or leave enough points for a target. I don't actually have to take it. 3 column shifts gives me 4-2-2. 4 hits. Okay. 4 X's will destroy 4 ships. You know, instead 3-2-2 is pretty decent actually, because I can hit some bigger ships. It's not that I'm just interested. Yeah, let's go to the 3-2-2. We're going to take 1 column shift for 2 points, and then use 6 of the points to pick specific targets. We'll hit a big battleship instead of doing more hits, because wiping out little cruisers isn't terribly useful. So we have a 3-2-2, and 2 of those 3 hits the Japanese are going to get to pick, and they'll pick well, maybe they'll go after battleships anyway. Let me sort through and we'll see what they destroy. Looks like it's going to be a bad day for the Anzac Navy. Yeah, I'm just picking on them. Okay, so the Japanese picked 2 of the battleships here, the Warspite and the Revenge. The Allies then get to pick the 3rd destroy, and they go for the Australia. And then they take the Canberra and I can't read what this is. It's not Wombat. Gambia. And Gambia, and they're picking those for damage. And then these 2 are going to be aborts. Now, that doesn't mean that happens, though. We have to make a roll. If we roll higher than the defense factor, it takes a lesser result. So let's check for the Warspite. It does not roll higher, so it is actually destroyed. That's one problem with going after battleships, is you probably won't sink them. And same with some of the heavier carriers. Over to the next one. Yeah, this is going to be damaged, and it's going to, I believe, flee to the repair pool. and the Australia is destroyed. Now, the reason is you reduce to the next lowest level. So now these two damages, we have a 6 and a 7. They're both damaged. They go to the repair pool. In the normal scenario, in the Grand Campaign, you pay points to repair your ships. In this scenario, you get 1 free repair each turn. And that just, I think, puts it back on the track. I don't know how long it takes to repair them. And then these are my aborts. Okay, they both rolled higher. They both abort. Now, where do they go? They return to base according to return to base rules 13.4. Well, we'll look up. I don't think I have to go here where I'm vulnerable. I think I'm going to be able to flee a little further afield, but I'm not sure. Okay, well, with the Brits losing what little air power they had, they have some tough choices here. I'm still out here. If I don't abort, I go to another round of naval combat. Now, a round of naval combat includes making those search die rolls again, another possibility for surprise. This was a bad result. But do I want to stick around and see my ships get hammered? Or, you know, do I want to try to get out of this with some of my fleet and maybe hope the American combined fleet can drive the Japanese into a situation where they're not going to be able to focus really heavily on trying to make life. By the way, I could abort by my movement points, so I went to Bombay, and that's going to be where I reestablish my fleet if I withdraw. I think I want to withdraw. I just don't think I have much chance. You know what I forgot? I forgot the damn rain. The rain halves the values of the naval combat, of the air to naval. Oh well. I'm not going to go back and undo that. Maybe there was a little clearing in the weather. Anyway, the British fleet is all going to abort. Now this causes problems though, because the Japanese are now free to do a port bombardment up here at Trincomalee, and they're also free to move ships with impunity into the Bay of Bengal and start causing problems. So I've got some invasion capability or whatever here. I don't know what can invade and what can't, though, out of these things. Some of these are transports. One of them I think is an amphib, but it's hard to tell. What I have to do, the only way I can tell, is to look here and try to see if I can understand it from here. So these guys are transports with the 2 ships. I think this, yeah, that's an amphibious. The transports, I believe, can transport Marines, and I have Marines capable here. And then I also have other forces back here. So I should be able to launch a fairly hefty attack in Ceylon. Is Ceylon what I want? Shit, I don't know. You know, I mean, that's where this whole scenario kind of falls apart for me, is I have no idea what I want to take and what I don't. In the grand strategic game, I'm not going to be much better. I just have no idea of how to handle naval strategy when it's on a hex grid somehow. Japanese planes have to return to their carrier. There's no roll or anything. They're not going to crash into the sea. And that's going to put it over to, well, no. I have a whole bunch left of the turn. So that's kind of the thing, is I just did the naval combat. That's real early in the turn, like I mentioned before. That's up here. So now I've got time for like land operations to take place. Now there's not a whole hell of a lot I can do. So I think in effect we're going to be moving that impulse track forward, because I don't think the Japanese are going to be doing any land operations. I am going to be doing some rebases perhaps. I've got this, which I probably... This is so shitty. I don't know what it's going to... It's this crappy little carrier plane. But as you take carrier losses, you can put your old planes on board your carriers, and then you still have, you know, some strike capability available. This guy, the way you can tell this guy's not a carrier plane is he doesn't have that little colored box on him. I kind of feel like I need air cover for Japan. Again, who knows, you know. when I get to the major thing, I'm probably going to be blundering around and see huge opportunities, and probably countries are going to fall under stupid circumstances. But yeah, this is probably pretty much end of impulse here. Also, other than the rain, I forgot I had to flip a Japanese ship to conduct the attack. I can conduct as many attacks as I want, and this convoy's getting out of here too. And I should be hunting down a convoy used marker. Again, it's in the pile of counters. I don't have a good way of having things set up to play this game under these circumstances. You know, I have this still set up because I want to get to it. This is going to fill up my room with tables. I don't know how I'm going to maneuver around, but we'll see. The other thing is, I wanted to point out what a pain in the bloody ass it is to get your carriers, to get your planes on your carriers. So you got to sort all your carriers out. I did this at the beginning of the game by color, and then look at all your planes by color and see who can land on what. So 42, I need a dark blue. That'll be the Zuikaku. Okay, we got one. I don't know what the next color is. I guess green is the next that I need to worry about. Looks like I have a green here and a green here. So I need 2 green carriers. And that'll be these 2. And so on. And, you know, you didn't have to worry about this with the original whiff. You didn't have the planes in flames, or ships in flames, or lighthouses in flames, or whatever. Carriers just had a carrier value, a plane value. In some ways, I think I kind of regret having sold my original, just because it was a cleaner game. But I'm playing this to try to capture some of the whiff more modern flavor. I'm not going to print out the newest rules. But plus, I wanted to get rid of extra boxes, too many games. Whiff is never going to be a favorite of mine, and if I'm going to have it, I might as well have the most modern rules. That's what people seem to play more nowadays. But in some ways, I kind of still prefer the Whiff 5. Perhaps because Whiff is not one of my favorite games. I don't want this much detail on a military game usually. La Grande Guerre is, of course, the... perhaps for a grand strategic, it's perhaps the only real counterexample I can give of one where, yeah, I want all that detail for some reason. I don't know why. AWE just does weird things to me. So long-term play, or even scenario play, I made a mistake by not killing those carriers. That would have been the definite thing, the goal for the scenario. Carriers are worth 4 points each in the scenario victory conditions. So, yeah. That's as much... at this as taking objective hexes and more than like oil resource hexes and such not, all of which are pretty damn important too. But in the course of a few years of war, knocking out some key carrier forces would have been a major advantage. On the other hand, if I hadn't knocked out the battleships, maybe, the Brits would have stuck around. I don't know. Anyway, we're not playing this to try to play optimal play in this scenario. So, we're on the Allied turn, and here it gets tough, because the Japanese have done what the Americans, probably should fear, which is they lowered the hammer on the Commonwealth, and now they're prepared to take operations here in India in order to make up for what might be gained there. And remember, I could have killed 2 carriers to boot. I think the U.S. force has to do something against Japan. What that something is, I don't know. Certainly setting up for a port bombardment would be a major factor, but I can't really do that. I've already committed my fleet out to sea. And here's the problem. Them being out at sea prevents bad things from happening, right? They're out at sea so that I don't get port attacked, essentially. Although you do have a 1-turn chance to avoid a port attack. You're not going to see another Pearl Harbor happen here with a full surprise attack. So we'll probably try to just shift up these forces further in and not try. We can't really engage the Japanese. If they want to engage the U.S. force, they can. If we have any naval air we want to throw into play. But we do want to move these Commonwealth forces out of Ceylon because they can be port attacked. And in order to do that, I'm going to set sail. I'll take the transport because I'm covering with it out into here. Now that's one movement point. I'll leave the transport behind because it's slow. No, I'll take it with me. It's safer with me, I think. Okay, now we have an interception attempt. And the interception is going to be a shot against the search table number, which is a 2. Now, if you recall, search table number, I think, has a carrier bonus, but I don't know if that applies to the interception. No, I think it just affects the... Oh, yeah, the carrier planes actually do take effect here. So we even out, and the Japanese need to get a 2 or less to succeed in stopping the Brits. Okay, they don't. So now the Brits can move on. And we'll move our second movement point here. Our third, we'll move the transport here. Fourth, fifth, sixth. And that puts us in a position where we're challenging one of the Japanese ships that's needed for victory points. This is worth 3 victory points if the Japanese can't hold this. Now, I do have other opportunities. I have some air points I could patrol with over here. So there are some potentials for me to try to protect that ship. This is also, pretty crappy compared to the British ships when it comes down to it. So we're going to have some worry there. The Japanese don't want to intercept, but the Brits are going to flip a ship over, as they did over here, to engage. And that's a ship that can't be used, for port attacks or anything like that. Not that that's really likely to happen. Still not sure what I'm doing with the U.S. Okay, U.S. didn't have any real naval movement. They already moved their navies, perhaps unwisely, because they're not going to be able to pick up their carrier planes as well as I would have hoped. Japanese are involved in a battle here. Before the battle starts, they can throw out a plane for an interception. They do so. That's now in that box, which means they're... I think they need an actual fleet there to protect that. And now the British and Japs roll their, I should say Brits and Japs, right? Roll their search rolls because the Brits are going to commit to a battle. It doesn't much matter what I commit, they all look about the same. Neither one rolls well enough, so neither side found the other. There's a possibility in later impulses that they'll find each other. The Brits have committed somebody to searching, so they can keep looking each round. But that's done there. I've got a little bit of air movement to take care of, and the weather is still not good enough that I want to launch, I think, the British attacks yet. Later in the impulse I might, but I'm going to try to take as much of Burma as I can, obviously. And we'll see what happens with that. I probably should have moved a Japanese unit into the mountains here to try to move into Burma as well. Okay, in order to do an invasion, and I'm going to do one of Colombo here, I moved a couple of Japanese Marines into place to do that. We're going to just test that out. That means a combined action, actually, because somewhere it says it takes up a ground movement and attack to do. So, when I do a combined action, I look, and for the Japanese land moves in a combined fine, we easily get into that 3 land moves, 1 land attack. We'll be able to do this. It's going to take up, I think, just 1 land move to move the 2 counters out from sea, but I'm not sure. They may each require 1. But I don't have a lot else that I want to move. And then for naval moves, though, that only gives me 2 naval moves, and actually because of the way I had things set up here in Netherlands, East Indies, it took 2 ships to move there, which means I can't move this task force out here into the Marshalls. I am kind of, pinging it back and forth. This was supposed to be a holding force against the U.S., but I look at it, and I think it could handle the U.S. pretty well. So I was contemplating an attack there. One thing I see with the game, even with everything wide open, you fight a major naval battle, one round of that battle has to be fought. There will be some casualties for the side that's weaker. But you can make some significant gains elsewhere if you try to consolidate your force into one big powerhouse attack. And what do you get out of it, right? I'm going to get Colombo out of this. Maybe. We'll see. And that's a pretty big effect. But I didn't destroy the British fleet. I destroyed the carrier. I could have destroyed the carriers, which would have been pretty big. Over here, what do I get if I attack the American forces? Well, I'm not going to get Honolulu out of it. Not easily. There's a force there. There's some defensive capabilities. If the fleet doesn't retreat there, I'm not going to get a port bombardment. So it ends up feeling kind of like victory in the Pacific, which is kind of a plug for that really, outstandingly light handling of this campaign. And I like that game a lot. In terms of what kind of strategy you kind of play out, you do have to kind of spread out and grab things. You don't get points for all the things. You also notice I put little dots. I don't know if I caught all the things that could be taken. There's some locations that didn't click for me where they were. One that I know has to be somewhere that I can find. I don't remember which one it is. But that should be somewhere close, but it had a Japanese sounding name. Oh, here it is, Taihoku. Let's get a chit for that. That one's actually within range. But it's kind of tough because things like China aren't really involved here. And I think I had another one that I threw out because it's... Oh, no. But I'm trying to capture the ideas, at least some places that I could launch those major offensives into to help direct my play. Anyway, let's get to the invasion. What's going to happen is, I think this flips the 2 transport ships. And they're going to make a landing here. That looks like it's in the same sea zone. This is the border for the sea zone here. It's over there, so we should be able to get in there. We're going to have as much naval gunfire as we can possibly handle, which is really the strength of the units, so the units will be doubled for this. There'll be 18 strength points coming in. But what about what they're facing? They're facing a notional unit who's in a city hex. That's 1 point for being there, 1 point for being city. This is not the home country of the major power, I don't think. Well, wait. India's a major... Yeah, I think India is considered a major power in its home country. Okay, so that gets us to 3. The Commonwealth's weird because it's 6 different major powers or something. If it's not stacked with a land unit but in the ZOC of a land unit, yeah, that would be the case. Friendly corps or army, yeah. So that brings me up to +4. The shore bombardment modifier for each invading unit, that's going to be the 1 star there. So that's going to be 2 more, so we're up to 6 strength points for it. It's not out of supply, it's not surprised. So that thing's got 6 strength points. I'm attacking with 18. Let's keep seeing if there's anything other than this. Any result other than a dash will destroy the notional unit. Okay. so 18 to 6 is 3 to 1. It's going to be an assault. Can I throw... I should be able to throw some air support into this too. The notional unit's already flipped, so flipping it won't do any good. I could expend air units, though, which have bombardment factors. So that's... and these aren't out of play for battle. 2, 4. I think I can only use as much as the ground units for this kind of support. These aren't stacked correctly. Well, I don't have enough to get another odds shift. If I do the proportional odds, it works, but... Alright. So we're stuck with 3 to 1. And I can't put these back in place. On the assault table, +1. Oh shit. That's mountains. Let's find the terrain effects. Defender doubled and has choice. Alright, well, that kind of screws us here, right? If we were attacking here, we would have been facing a slightly weaker notional unit. If the defender just doubled, that puts him up to 12, which means we need those 6 air points. God damn it. These slick counters are really hard to cope with. I don't think I have them. Alright, well, I guess it's 1 to 1 on the assault table. There's a 3 to 2. This isn't going to work. I roll a 10, which means I shatter. These are not expended or something. I don't know where's... Oh, there. That's a boat, not a... Son of a bitch. Okay, so we have successfully taken Colombo, but our units are flipped, which means they're not going to be continuing on. Now that's a major objective, you know, so that's enough to kind of not win the game, but put some big goals on there. Guadalcanal itself is not an important objective, but it is a pathway of some sort to get you to Rabaul or possibly into Australia. That's the only reason I can justify an attack there. It's not even a major port, so I don't know how much value it really serves. Unlike something like Victory in the Pacific, there isn't, you know, some limited number of ports. If I get this, well, there's plenty of other places I could grab as ports. So putting a big contest over that one seems kind of weird. Anyway, I've got some straightening up to do, and then I guess we're on to the Allied turn. If I do a return to base, I could unflip some of these units, and that's something I may want to consider. So for example, if I want to do a port attack over here and, you know, bust the living hell out of the British fleet, I can do that. Now, I think they can do a rebasing operation even if flipped, though. I don't know. I've probably lost some planes, if that is the case, back in the Barbarossa scenario, that could have gotten out of there flipped. I seem to remember there was a way to get out of places if you're flipped. But we'll look into whether or not we want to pull back some units and have Yamamoto unflip them so that they can engage in another round of activity and maybe, you know, loosen things up here. So a couple little other things. Over here I moved a Japanese ship into play where the Brits were. I chose not to try to search to attack. Killing a couple of cruisers doesn't really matter to me. What would matter is losing my shipping in the South China Sea. It would be harder for me. I'd have to find another ship, maybe pull something out of a truck to get it there, whatever. And timing might go terrible. I might get really unlucky. And, you know, I just don't want to take that chance. So it's safe for me to just patrol and protect my convoys, as it were. I did pull back 4 carriers, and Yamamoto refreshed them. That's going to be prepared for the port attack here. Now that would be kind of dangerous if the Brits had any surface ships out here, but they have nothing left basically. So I can do that successfully. They won't be able to get out of there. In order to get out of this port, they have to do a naval move, and they have to be unflipped to do that. So that's that side of things, and I guess we're shifting over after. We're going to make a check for turn end. And no turn end. So we'll be back to the Allied turn there. And yes, this is going long. There's not going to be a lot more happening, I don't think. There might be another major naval battle. I won't go into too much detail with it. If there's the port attack, I will for that. But the point is, with these turns, and this happens on the ground turns too. Basically, there's a couple of impulses where a lot of stuff happens, but for the most part, that's it. You know, you might have a little bit of exploitation or something, or a situation like this where I'm pulling something back and refreshing it to prepare for a secondary attack. But for the most part, there are really just a couple of impulses where really heavy action ends up happening at all. And the weather can kind of help determine, you know, is this the impulse of the turn? At this point, the Allied turn, they may want to end things. They don't want that port attack to come off. They don't want whatever Yamamoto is planning on doing down here. So they're going to both pass, actually. The Americans would kind of like to have done some additional rebases, but rebases are kind of free, except for this ship here. They don't really have anything over there they're able to do without a leader in place. I could have pulled some of the fleets out of the Polynesian Sea out and have MacArthur reactivate them. And that might help the situation. But as it is, normally, if everybody passes on the full 4-map games, that's going to be a 2-point modifier to the end of turn test. If all but one power passes, it's a 1-point modifier. But because this is only a 2-map game, we're only going to get a 1-point modifier. But it does mean that I have a 30% chance of ending the turn here before the Japanese get to do anything else. Oh well, you know. So we'll push this impulse over to a Japanese one. And we'll go to their weather and see what they manage to do. Ended up getting terrible weather again, the 1 roll, which means that we're going to be pushing out to here. We don't want to pass because we don't particularly want the turn to end, but there's nothing we can do here. If we have to, we'll activate something, but I don't want to think about that too much. I could do a rebase out to Rabaul, I bet. 1, 2, 2, 4, 6, 8. Nah, I can't make it that far. But I'll activate something and move it, I don't know. But that means we have a chance of the turn ending here. And it does. And that means next turn is going to have that +2 weather example. This was Japanese went first and second. So the initiative drops down. And what else? Well, we have to return to base and such not. But otherwise, this is pretty much over. As we push into July, August, a few things I want to note. One is all the ships more or less returned. I still got convoys out at sea. Ships would decrease which box they're in. There's reasons you want to leave ships out in the boxes. but I couldn't think of a good one in this case. Basically, they have to do with supplying supplying forces, preventing the supply for enemy forces. If you don't um, leave a sea area interdicted by your own patrols or whatever, it's possible for an enemy to get a jump. And this happens a lot in the Mediterranean, where generally the Brits will have sea control over the Mediterranean just to prevent the Italians or any German forces in North Africa or whatever from being able to get too much supply. They have to kind of fight their way through for it. And that creates a great deal of problem. If you don't interdict the sea area, if you don't keep some kind of ship that can hunt down the convoys, you run into a problem. But of course, the Axis powers can throw a bunch of ships or whatever out there, contest the control, and then set it up so that you have to send out another squadron. And it can become a real pain in the ass and kind of a betting game almost as to, how much are you willing to risk for this? Ooh, I forgot to flip over. Oh, no, I didn't. So I've also unflipped all the units, including the military here, of course. The other thing that happens in this scenario is each nation gets one repair, and those take 2 turns each. Now, cost-wise, I guess the repairs cost the same as the first initial laydown cost, which looks like it tends to be lower than the finishing cost. I thought it would be the finishing cost. I don't have to pay production in this scenario, but in general, any kind of repairs are going to cost you production. And in fact, I think they may not actually be limited. So repairing ships, they may be limited by the gearing limits, but certainly you would be repairing ships rather than building new ones. So the conceit in this scenario that you only get to repair one ship per turn is a limitation that's reasonable for the scenario, I suppose, but it probably doesn't convey what would actually be happening in the campaign game, because you don't want to leave wrecked stuff out there unless it's obsolete. Obsolete stuff might not be worth fixing. For the same reason that you pull it out of your construction pool, you don't want to rebuild that stuff. So yeah, I guess we're about done with the May-June turn, and we'll continue on. I don't know if we're going to finish the scenario. Chances are probably not, because this is really just an exploration. I'm not headlining this anywhere. It's just included on the game boxes. I created a couple entries for the land exploration and naval exploration. I did the DoD exploration separately because I view that as a between the wars thing. I'm going to run the full boat though as World War II rather than between the wars. I don't know, just because I am playing both together. All right, let's end this up then.